A short time ago, the British Red Cross sent me some encyclopedias, and I am hoping to be able to share some of the information contained within them to you and with you. Because I believe that it is very important, in fact could be crucial information, though the encyclopedia I speak of is from 1972. Now let's take a look. The 1972 Britannica Yearbook of Science and the Future. On it you will see a beautifully engraved thistle. And I will read the foreword to you first of all. Publisher William Benton, Chicago, Toronto, London, Geneva, Sydney, Tokyo, Manila. Extensive editorial advisory board. Executive editor Richard G. Young. Francis Bacon, living at the beginning of the 17th century, was one of the first great enthusiasts of science in our modern sense of the term. Before his time, Bacon thought science had been concerned only with studying the ways of nature for its own sake. But in his view, science should be studied for its potential benefits to man. He therefore explained and extolled scientific method. He pointed the way to man's control of nature. He tried to convince his fellowmen, that through understanding nature they could learn to live like kings. In the 3.5 centuries since Bacon's death, man has been ingenious in solving the riddles of nature. He has learned to exploit external nature as never before, and thereby enormously improved his life. Almost all of us live better now than kings did in Bacon's time. And it is the attitude towards science that Bacon helped develop that has given us this new wealth and power. Recently, however, we have come to the bitter realization that control of nature is not enough. Mere power over external nature is not necessarily to man's benefit. Indeed, just the opposite may be the case. Science now casts such ambiguous portents over the human adventure that the future may hold more hazard than hope. This insight is not wholly new. It is the business of the future to be dangerous, said Alfred North Whitehead. But he could not imagine the enormity of the perils that we are just beginning dimly to see. Science has delivered to a few national leaders a power that hitherto was credited only to Bronze Age gods, one mistake in the use of which, through greed, pride, or ambition, could indeed wipe civilization from the face of the earth. But beyond that, science has given even the least of us enormous and little understood powers for both good and ill. A simple act like spraying the roses with an insecticide can have consequences we cannot foretell. Man's response has not been to put an end to science, but to give it a new urgency. Science now arouses not only the imagination of man, but also his conscience. People today are sensing the fact that they are dealing with essential values that they do not want corrupted, either by science or within it. Many of the articles in our 1972 Britannica Yearbook of Science in the Future reflect this new view. Margaret Mead, for example, whose fame as a social reformer has perhaps eclipsed her renown as an anthropologist, says that she learned early in her career that it was not only research but also a climate of opinion ready to let it be used that was important. Thus, she says, she purposely has divided her time between science and the climate in which it might flourish beneficently. The impact on science of the social imperative can be seen in the newspaper headlines. For example, the vigorous current effort towards arms control and the decision of the US Congress in 1971 not to finance an SST. We see it from a different and deeper perspective in this yearbook, in the kind of laboratories that man sets up, the article A Freedom to Excel, and in the places he hopes to establish them, colonising the moon. We see it in the way that man relates to himself, instant intimacy, and to the integrity of his art, how science detects art fakes. We see it in such an article as The UN, Its Science Mission, which describes how man has shaped his supranational institutions, supranational institutions, the better to use the gifts of science. The article is written by Dr. Walter Koschnick, my longtime friend, and my associate in the State Department when I served as Assistant Secretary of State. We see it also in the attempts to decline the implications of man's technological triumphs. One of the many disturbing facts discussed in this yearbook, you'll find it in the article titled Buried in Affluence, is that the average family of four in America discards many tons of trash and garbage every year. Much of that trash turns out to be indestructible. Plastic containers, for example, because technology made it so. But as you will discover in the article Materials from the Test Tube, technology also is being directed to find ways to induce decay in the seemingly indestructible. For example, by attaching ultraviolet sensitive chemical groups to the polymer molecules that bind the plastic, so that the containers will be perishable when exposed to sunlight. Now, I just have to say that in some ways, I agree that we don't want to be flooded with plastic and we've got to do something about it, but I prize durable plastic and endurable plastic as well myself personally, and wouldn't want plastic to necessarily degrade very quickly all the time. Right. Thus, the connective tissue of technology, the relations of the various scientific disciplines to one another, as well as their interrelation to social needs, can be traced in this volume. From the articles on materials and the energy crisis, 72 this is, through those on washing our dirty water and buried in affluence. Man is adapting to the linked opportunities of science. He is facing up to the disillusioning discovery that science is neutral, not necessarily beneficent, that it will kill as readily as it will heal. This generation has learned from the past. Experience, as Arnold Toynbee has said, is another word for history. But there is still much to learn. The basic problem, perhaps, is to realise that control over nature is essentially perilous, just as control over men is essentially immoral. Nature is our partner on spaceship Earth, and we must treat her like a friend. If we treat her like a slave, if we try to dominate her to our will, she will rise against us in revolt. This man, who has used science to bring about understanding of the natural world, must in the future use it increasingly to bring about order in his own.